And here's your host, Amina Fakir.
I'm pleased to welcome you to today's conversation with the legendary Oz Scott. Oz Scott was born in Hampton, Virginia. As the son of an Army chaplain, Scott lived in several cities in the U.S., Germany, and Japan before settling in Mount Vernon, New York, where he developed a passion for theater while at Marlborough College. He then attended Antioch College's graduate program and was accepted into the directing program at New York University, where he learned the craft of filmmaking. After that graduation, he met Ntozake Shange, who was interviewing directors to stage her series of poems for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. Scott directed Bustin' Loose, starring Richard Pryor, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He then helmed The Jeffersons for 2 seasons, which launched his 30-plus-year television directing career, including Archie Bunker's Place, The Cosby Show, Hill Street Blues, 227, L.A. Law, Chicago Hope, Soul Food, Criminal Minds, CSI New York, and Blackish. He also received a coveted Directors Guild nomination award for the tween sensation movie The Cheetah Girls. Recent credits include Gotham and Black Lightning. All right. Good morning, Oz. How are you this morning?
I'm doing fine. And you?
I'm doing very well. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us. I know this is a time of trial and challenge for everyone. And what I'm really wanting to know is how are things for you? And what are you doing to make it through? Creative types tend to keep working, even when we're not called on to work. And that's sort of the message I've been getting. But just let me know from your perspective, what's life like right now?
Let's put it this way. Last year, I walked into the Directors Guild and to the administrative offices, and I saw up on the wall all the board members. And every one of those board members was white. No black members up there. And I got a little upset. I got angry, but I wanted to channel that anger into doing something about it. And at our convention last year, I said, I'm going to run, and I'm going to, and not be an alternate. I want to be a full board member. So we went after it, and I got on the board.
All right, congratulations.
I went up against Steven Spielberg. I understood I'd probably lose against him. I got in there quick, early, and so now there is one black face on that.
Wow.
One of the things that I'm doing is I'm working with the Directors Guild.
Mm-hmm.
It's a time of introspection, of challenging, of seeing where we are, what we're doing, not only with the COVID, but with the racial, and one of the things I've said to them is, yes, we need to point the finger at people.
Yeah.
But we also have to look inside, and we have to challenge ourselves and make sure that when we do point the finger, that the finger is also pointed at us. And so I'm on meetings a lot, trying to figure out what the Directors Guild can do for itself.
Yeah.
They're looking and saying, the fact that there's only one board member, no officers, that's 20, I think it's 20 members, one black person. Why is that? Also, I've got a Thursday night where I get together with all my old New York theater people and some of the original For Colored Girls and some people I went to school with, and we sit there and talk. Some nights it goes on for 2 or 3 hours, and it's inspiring. Wow. Sometimes we don't talk about anything. We do no agenda. I'm going to start trying to make agendas, but it's great just to talk. And there's one friend who's in Atlanta who was isolated by herself, she said, oh my God, I got a good night's sleep. 2 weeks ago, I got Dwight Andrews on, who is the Congregational Church of Atlanta.
Okay.
And because he had done a lot of August Wilson's original music and so he got on, and he was like, oh my God, this was like being at church. We have to take the time to really talk, and Zoom is helping us. I'm talking to people in Germany, and having really intense conversations about what's going on there. I'm talking to people in Italy and having intense conversations on what's happening there. I think there's some good things with Zoom and there's some bad things with Zoom. There's good things with Zoom is for our African American steering committee, when we, at the Directors Guild, we get 35, 40 people. We have probably the largest turnout of all the steering committees, of all the diversity steering committees. But now we're getting 125, 130 people at a Zoom meeting from all over the country. And it's like, wow, we're getting so many people. This is great. But there's a problem. And the problem is the 20 minutes before a meeting and the 20 minutes after a meeting, when you can sit there and have that personal time, that one-on-one time where you can talk about what are you doing, where have you been, haven't seen you in a long time. And I was even talking to Dwight Andrews about a church. You know, sometimes the best part of church is talking to people before and talking to people
standing
after.
on the sidewalk afterwards. That's right.
And that's something we can't lose. And if that means having our little breakout groups where we get together on regularly on a Thursday night. I got my guys, we do a happy hour on a Friday night where we just sit there and we just talk, and my wife and everybody hears us yelling and screaming and laughing and shouting at each other. And it's just fun. I mean, that's the thing that kind of keeps you going and keeps you remembering that this too will pass. And when it does pass, what will it be? Hey, let's just remember, after the Spanish flu, as Black people, I always said we had the 20s. We had the Harlem Renaissance. I heard somebody on the news say, well, after the pandemic, we had the Roaring 20s. And I said, oh, that's right. There was the Roaring 20s. I forgot about that. But for us, there was the Harlem Renaissance. And hopefully, let's find what that Renaissance is going to be coming forward. So in about 2 or 3 years, we're going to have an emergence of so much that is going to come out of where we are now.
So with your group, were you always meeting on Thursdays, or is this something new that came about in response to what's going on now?
This just came up. It was like I had a Thursday night free and I was supposed to be speaking and it fell through, and I said, shoot, I got this Zoom. Let me call my people up.
Nice.
And I called up my people from New York and Woody King gets on. And
Woody King. We did a documentary on him. Yay, great guy.
David gets on. Trezana Beverly, who won the Tony for Color Girls, gets on.
Right.
Kadoga, who's head of the performing arts at Spelman, she was in the original for Color Girls. She gets on. We have just, it's just fun, and it's and sometimes we get very deep, and sometimes we don't.
It sounds wonderful. But, in looking over, your impressive list of achievements, I do kind of note common threads. You seem to have planning and foresight and vision going for you, going way back to, it looks like, college. So do you think that's, and I notice that when I talk to people now, they're coming up with ways, they're reinventing themselves. It seems like that's sort of you were already up to speed with that. You're always like, you're planning now what's going to happen when we come out of this with regard to the DGA and the entertainment industry. When we spoke earlier, you shared with me your participation on the scientific committee with the organization in North Carolina on organ regeneration. So it seems like you're always planning ahead. Would you say that's sort of visionary?
That's who I've always been.
Absolutely.
I'll be honest with you. I went to 5 colleges because I could probably survive a year. Yikes. I survived 2 years at one just because I was never there. I was always working. So, but like my daughter turned to my son and he said, "Did you know Dad did a 5-year college in 3.5 years?" And my son said, "Dad's always got to hustle."
Right. Still.
But for me, it was always forward looking. It's always pushing. It's always finding, and it's always daring. I tell the story that I had a girlfriend at the time who was applying to medical school when I applied to NYU. at theater school, and she got into Yale and NYU. So I said, "Oh,
Oh.
great! You should, I'm the man. You should come to NYU." So she went to Yale. So that, and so as I dropped her off at Yale, I said, "Give me a minute. I'll be back in an hour." And I got in the car and I drove over to the Yale School of Drama.
Okay.
And I walked into the Yale School of Drama. Now I'm getting ready to start NYU theater school in 3 weeks, 3 weeks.
Right.
I walk in there. I said, "I want to talk to the dean or somebody." So I get into the associate dean's office and I tell him, "Listen, I know that school's beginning and I'm going to NYU, but I will give you the opportunity to let me come to Yale."
Oh my goodness.
And
such bravado.
After the in the conversation, he said, "Yeah, okay, you can start in 2 weeks with the incoming class." But then he went on to talk about, "But I want you to understand, this was right after the 60s, after the revolutionary theater, after agitprop, after black theater, and we want to really make Yale a school of classical." And I said, "Oh, I guess you really don't want me coming here." So I went to NYU. That's where my head was there were no barriers. There was nothing to stop me. There was nothing to keep me from not going in that direction if I wanted to.
Okay, so now where did that come from? Because that obviously serves you well. It has typified, your sort of philosophy of life, your career progression. But, for people who are looking and searching for, where did that come from? What was the origin of that?
I look at my parents. I think, when I did the History Makers, really spent a lot of time talking about my parents because my mother and my father, they were different kind of people. They were ahead of their time. So it was always fascinating to me. So that's kind of where I came from.
Okay, well, we thank them also. Now, I'm noticing that you have a lot of this avant-garde thinking that spills over into every area that you work in, and it looks like it's worked out most of the time. When you went on and you wanted to restructure the way the Jeffersons was shot, for instance, at the placement of the actors in front of the table and things like that. But we oftentimes in life learn the most when things don't work out the way we thought. Do you have an instance of that you could share with us?
Absolutely. I mean, I know that Sam Jackson and I were playing golf one day, and he got into the brush, and he said, "The game is getting out of these situations." And that's kind of the way we look at life. It's about, okay, I'm in the rough now. How do I get back onto the fairway and stay in the game?
Okay.
I think For Colored Girls is really an example of breaking the mold of finding ways. I always tell the story where Ntozake came to me with the poems and said, let's make a play out of these. And I said, "I'll give you a play.
You find a venue.
You find a venue." And
right.
found a bar on the Lower East Side with no door between the jukebox and
the chicken in the back, frying chicken in the back.
So we did that, and that was great, and it was innovative. And what we did,
it was,
how it was structured, how we played with it, how we worked it, and then taking it from a Black theater situation where Black people talk back to the theater, to the past.
Right.
You would get, you'd get this overwhelming response all the way through the play. And then we had to go to the public theater when it became a predominantly white audience. And then it was like, oh, wow, what do we do here? How do we make this work? And making the adjustment that kept what we had, but can expand that audience. And that was, I'm constantly doing that. I think I love one experience where I was doing Played, which was a TV movie for VH1. And the first day we got out there and I had a DP and we were doing a driving shot and we had this Cadillac Escalade and we mounted the cameras and it was a great shot and we were towing it and the car wouldn't tow. And now we've got a specific amount of time. We don't have a lot of money because we are a urban film.
Right.
Everybody had bailed on VH1 and we had to do it for less money than they did any of their, about $1.2 million less than they did for anybody else. So
Kelsey, please, right?
like I remember the great line was Reuben Cannon. They came to Reuben Cannon, who was casting, and they said, "Reuben, can Oz do this film for this little bit of money?" Which was $2 million, which, you know, they had been doing everything for $3.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
And Reuben said to them, "That's not the question you need to ask. He can do it. The question is, should he do it?"
Wow.
So that's what we did. So that day that we couldn't get the car towed, I was like, "Oh, what do we do? What do we do?" And I said, "Okay, take the camera off the mounts. Let's do this handheld. The whole film's going to be handheld." And the DP said, "But I can make it pretty." I said, "I don't want it pretty. That's not what this film's about." And we create a style in that moment, which became extremely handheld, extremely live, extremely rich. It was a very rich, but extreme times calls for extreme solutions, and we found it and we carried it on and put that film up against anything else.
You know, that brings me to another point, and that is the can-do spirit is so empowering. You know, we just are celebrating, I think it's 30 years since I did my first film, and young students always ask me, "What were you thinking, you know, back then making a film like that?" It was a film that was it was a Black film, but it wasn't about being the Black experience. It wasn't an urban film, and it went on to win Sundance that year, but didn't get distribution. So it has the distinction of being the grand jury prize winner that didn't get distribution and was supposedly buried by, you know, the powers that be. But anyway, the young kids always say, "Well, what were you thinking, you know, making a film like that back then?" And I had to think about it. It was during Black History Month, and I said, I was thinking, we can do this. You know, it's we're gonna make this movie. We like the script. He likes the script. I like the script. We have the money. We can do this. It just tears down so many barriers when you have the can-do spirit and you don't ask and you don't look for permission and you don't try to, you know, copy something, because we live in the times right now where the land is covered with copies.
I want to say that I was sitting in a meeting with Douglas Turner Ward at the Negro Ensemble Company.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Doug saying to me, "Oz, sometimes you just have to admit you can't do something." And I looked at him and I got up after the meeting and I walked out and I said, "I can do anything I want to." I mean, I love that. And I think that spirit is in the millennials. It's in the youth. It's in the people who say, you know, who don't know. I was talking to the producer of The Wiz, who, like he said, if I knew what I knew once we got to Broadway, I would have closed that show in Baltimore. Yeah. But because I didn't know, I kept pushing. And I think with us, we constantly keep pushing. And if you really look at the history of innovation with Francis Bacon, with Albert Einstein, with so many great minds, that 25, 26, 27, 28-year-old, right in there is when they're ripe, because they don't have any boundaries. They don't have any limits. They're like, okay. And most of their things comes from that moment. And I will tell you, even to this day, because I'm not 27 anymore.
No.
I'm still looking. I'm still trying to create. I'm still not taking no for an answer. I'm still not saying, well, I can't do this, so let me just do. No, I'm still out there. I still want to try something. I still want to look at a shot. I want to look at something. And I demand that of everybody around me. I have a cinematographer on Black Lightning who I loved when he was my B camera operator, because he would get under the table and say, here's a great shot. Or he'd be climbing up into the rafters, said, I can put the camera here. I was like, wow. And then we elevated him to the cinematographer.
Mm-hmm.
And he started doing things standard. And I was sitting there, like, we'd set up a shot. And I'd say, okay, make the camera lower, do the camera there, put the camera under the desk. And I said, wait, stop. I want you in this position because of your vision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now you're not giving that to me anymore. You're starting to just give me. And he said, but Oz, now I got to think about lighting, and I got to think about this, and I got to think about this. And I said, yeah.
Right.
So what's the problem?
But you can, right.
I said, I'm the director. I got to think about the actors. I got to think about the costumes. I got to think about this. I said, I expect you to think about all that and
mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember from that day on, all of a sudden, everybody said, wow. Even my editor said, boy, that was different from that day on. I said, yes, it was. Because I said, no, there is no excuse to just give me anything.
Mm-hmm. After that, he was busting loose, huh?
That's right.
Okay.
Working with Richard Pryor, what was fabulous about Richard is I think a lot of us know how to buffer ourselves, how to protect ourselves from the world.
Right.
People like Richard Pryor don't know how to do that.
No filter.
No filter. And we laugh at them because, oh my God, I understand that. That's funny. I remember with Richard, he told a story on his comedies and concerts once, and I went up to him and I said, Richard, that story about this funeral for your father, and there was no black, it was just all black people, and there's one white woman pops up, and then she throws herself into the casket, and she's crying profusely. That was funny. That was a funny story. And Richard looked at me and said, do you think my mother thought that was funny? And I was like, whoa. And I realized the pain that his comedy came from. And we could sit there and laugh at it because it is a funny story.
Yeah.
But like with Busting Loose, he looked at me and said, I have a problem with women and I have a problem with children. Oh. And this film, I want to really examine that. That was the examination. All those kids represented part of him. So, so for me, that's where my art comes from. That's where I want to talk about. I want to talk about what makes us real people and human people, and where does the comedy come from? I know that there's times like when I did the pilot for 227, they got upset with me because Oz, it's now everybody laughed. The network fell out. When they sent it to the advertisers said it's too strong. The words came back. And I said, strong, that means it's too real. Yeah. Marla Gibbs and I got in there and we wanted to tell the story of these real people. And Norman took that and he said, okay, let's soften it up and let's vary this pilot. Let's not have this pilot up front. And he said, we're going to make it number 4, number 5. So they wrote 3 or 4 scripts and they did the first one, which was really milquetoast. And they said, Norman said, uh-oh, everybody stop. Let's get this pilot on because we're going to lose this show. But for me, what was great about what Norman Lear did with Archie Bunker was the comedy came out of the reality.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's for me, that's where I live. I want to know when I get comedy that's just silly and stupid, I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. But when I have a blind kid, when I hired a real blind kid in Busting Loose, and I had him sitting in the front of the bus, And when the Ku Klux Klan member came on, and we didn't know how to make the Klan funny. And in the situation, I said, okay, what do blind kids do when they're in front and somebody's talking? They put their hands up. I said, okay, I want you to reach up, grab the hood, pull the hood off. And we're laughing. It's all very funny. And Richard with this line, we're on our way to the Ray Charles Institute for the Blind. They're all blind.
Right.
And I know they run it. They run it on the Oral Roberts show, and I know they run it in your neighborhood. That came out of the moment. That was not written. That came out, and then the guys, and the only line the Klansman said in the entire film was, "Okay, we'll give you a push." Right. Out of the mud. Right. And I turned to Richard and I said, okay, Richard, that was, and the crew they were laughing. Oh my, it was the funniest thing. And I said to Richard, let's do it again. And he said, what do you mean, let's do it again? Right. He said, I want to do it. Oh, that's right. You're Mr. Director. I got to do what Mr. Director says. I'll do it again. He did the very same line about the Ray Charles Institute for the Blind. And then at the end, when the guy says, we'll give you a push. He said, you're a great American, a great human being, the way he did in the first one. Gives him a kiss, right? And it was, it was brilliant. Right. And the crew, which was falling out laughing, the first take was dead silent the second take because it had transcended. Right. For me, that's what I'm always looking for. How do we transcend that moment? How do we take the reality of our situations and put them in such a way that we can laugh at them? But as Ntozake, we have to laugh to keep from crying. Oh, yes, yes, yes. And so when I just can't do a silly film, I just don't know how to do it. Yeah. Some people say, Oz, you do comedy well. And I said, no, I do real life well. So was there a surprise assist? There's, usually there's a surprise deterror, but was there a surprise assist or someone that you thought you could only expect X level from who just went above and beyond and proved to be a great mentor or assistance to you in any way? I think Lloyd Richard, I really do look up to, because Lloyd was at the O'Neill Playwrights Conference. Lloyd started the O'Neill Playwrights Conference. The whole term dramaturg came out of Lloyd Richards, out of what was going on at the O'Neill. There was no dramaturgs before. I remember somebody coming to me and saying, Oz, do you do dramaturgical work? And I'm like, that's what a director does, I don't know what that means. But so Lloyd created a whole lot of things, and I don't know if I have Lloyd's calmness, which I do have, but Lloyd knew how. I remember when the story goes that August Wilson was watching something in Fences and came when they were going to Broadway and said, Lloyd, tell them to do it this way. And Lloyd said, give him a minute. And the next day, they say August was squirming because he hadn't said anything. And the next day, the actors hit it. Just the way August had wanted them to do it. But organically. It was organic. And which is kind of the way I feel I work anyway. The calmness of Lloyd, the centeredness of Lloyd sort of taught me to have that. Raised on the East Coast, living on the West Coast, you have family here. You alluded to the fact that you have grandchildren raising with more East Coast sensibilities, because I'm from Detroit. I'm from the Midwest, and I've actually lived in California longer than I lived in Detroit, but I still consider myself very Midwestern. How about you? I'm definitely East Coast. Yes. And after the earthquake, we lost our house. And we had to do rebuild. And because we had no house, I was getting ready to go to the O'Neill that summer. And I piled everybody into the car. And we drove to the East Coast. And so we were at the O'Neill up in Connecticut for the summer. And then we put them into school in Montclair, where my wife is from. And they were in Montclair. And I remember my son saying to me, Dad, why are we here? And when are we going home? We are here because we are from the East Coast. And my son looked at me and said, no,
Me.
you and
Right.
mom have to be
Right.
We from California.
My kids are the very same.
And I had an academic advisor to the kids who told me the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast, and you will understand this, is on the West Coast, there are a lot of groups, and you can flit around from group to group.
Right.
On the East Coast, you got
a tribe.
Yeah.
Right.
And to get into that tribe, to get into that group is not easy because you're an outsider.
Right.
But once you get into that tribe,
it's for life.
For life.
Right.
Like my Thursday night, them my East Coast people, some here, some there. It's my tribe.
Wow. Okay, well, if we could just sum up something that our listeners and viewers can take with them that will motivate them as they go forward in the next week, month, year, we don't know how long. Again, this is all gonna last. What would you say?
I would say take this time, take this moment, and take your friends and take your people and understand that the world is bigger than you. The world is bigger than the people right around you. This is a huge world, and where my friends are not just theater people, not just film people, there are doctors and there's lawyers and there's scientists and there are accountants and they all come with something, and listen to them because they will open your eyes. They will give you something, like I say, they'll give you something to write about, they'll give you something to talk about. And those are the things that are important.
This has been really great. I want to thank you for all of your time and wish you well. We'll look to see something authentic and bold and elevating in the near future, in addition to your outstanding body of work.
Well, thank you.
Yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. I can create. I can innovate. Oh, I can create whatever I want to. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. I am creating every day. Every day. Innovation is how I make a way from no way. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can. My mind is free. Creativity just works for me like serendipity.